Hello guys, Lee from Inner Peak. Today I'm going to talk through the Level 2 certificate in planning and delivering gym-based exercise, learner record. As you can see, here we have the index and all the criteria that you'll need to study and go through to complete the Level 2 qualification. On page 2 here, you can see we have a content of units. So these are basically all the units that you need to complete in order to gain your certificate. As you can see here, some of them are written exams and some of them are actually practical supervised assessments which would take place in the gym. When you first meet your support tutor, which might be on day one of your practical learning days, you will be required to fill out an assessment record of achievement and declaration. And this is basically just to agree that you're happy to be assessed on all of your exams. So all you would be required to do there, and you can do this as soon as you receive your learner record, is to fill out your name, your signature and the date. And the rest of this is for your assessor to fill out, so you don't need to worry. Okay, so starting the learner record then, there's two options which will be explained by your tutor that you may wish to complete. And the first option is to actually fill out all of these questions for each unit and each worksheet by hand, just the old school way, filling out, read the book, read the manual that you receive, understand the material, and then try and answer these questions and put the answers down in your own words here. And again, your support tutor will guide you through how to complete these. And if you have any questions that you don't understand, you can always speak to your support tutor at any time during your course. If you don't like doing lots of writing and you choose to do the online multiple choice exams, you can do that, and that will allow you to forward all the way through to page 53. So that's quite a chunk of the qualification that will be completed if you do the online multiple choice exams. But if you have chosen that way, and that will take you to page 53, you'll see here that you have some instructions on how to prepare for instructing professional practice and effective exercise supervision in gym-based exercise sessions. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but what that basically means is this is you preparing for your final practical session, which will be explained again by your support tutor. And it tells you exactly here what your program card must include. For example, a warm-up 16-minute cardiovascular, 7 exercises that are a mixture of resistance machines, free weights and bodyweight exercises, and a suitable cool down to finish off the session. So once you've selected a client, and it might be somebody, a family member or a friend who wants to train with you in the gym, once you've done that, you need to, at some stage during the course, sit down with your client and go through some health screening. And this is the first part of the health screening. This is a client assessment, and it's often known as a physical activity readiness questionnaire, or a PARQ for short. And basically what it is a yes or no tick box to lots of questions here that will help you determine what their current health status is. And some of the questions in there make reference to any heart conditions, any chest pains that they may feel when they're doing physical activity, any dizzy spells, any joint problems, any medication that the client may be on. So if the client answers yes to any of these, you need to do some further investigation. For example, if the client has had a heart attack 2 weeks prior to meeting you and doing training, that would obviously be a big red flag that you would need to follow up and at very least get a doctor's note of approval, get that signed up so that you are covered and insured to train with this client. But hopefully, if your client is fit and healthy, most of these boxes will be checked with a no. Once you're happy and the client has answered all of the questions that are provided, then they just need to put their name, sign and date. Moving on to the next stage of the client interview or client assessment, you've got a template here that once you qualify, you can actually use with your own clients and chop and change some of these questions as and where necessary to suit your practice. But lots of basic questions in here, such as the name of the client, date of birth, gender, height, weight, etc. Some of these questions, especially the measurements that you can see here, are not very popular with some clients, and they will not be too happy with actually going through with those measurements. So one thing you need to make sure you keep in mind is that the client always comes first, and anything they don't want to give you, any information they're not happy to provide, then you don't take that from them. The more information you can take from them, obviously the better, because it gives you a good all-round picture of health, and it also helps you identify any goals that you may be thinking about with your client. Now, it may be that your client has a clear goal in mind, but actually some clients don't have any goals in mind, and they look to you as a personal trainer or a gym instructor to help them steer towards a goal, to aim for a goal. So, for example, if they were overweight or the blood pressure was really high, you could then factor that into creating some sort of goal for them. So maybe it's a weight loss goal, or just to get the heart in a healthier shape could be a really good goal for them. So once you've gone through this physical assessment, you've then got some lifestyle questions to ask, which you just sit down with your client and just go through one by one and see how much information you can take from your client. So for example, what do you do for work? What are your working hours? Do you have a family? What are your hobbies? So obviously these sorts of answers that they're going to give will give you an idea of how long you're going to get to train with the client, and also if they've got any sort of barriers that's going to stop them from training. You've then got some more health questions which talk about any sort of illnesses or injuries, aches and pains, and again, these are really important to find out, because you don't want to put your client through any sort of exercise that's going to make any injuries worse and leave them in a worse shape than when they first met you, obviously. So it's really important to get lots of info and build up a nice history and see where your client's at and how healthy they are. Once you've got all that information, you can then sit the client down and talk about some goals. And these are the goals here which you can see: short-term, medium-term and long-term goals. And these are what is known as SMART goals in the industry. You may have heard of this acronym before. It's quite a common goal setting method, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound. There are some different terminologies for some of these letters, but basically all equate to the same thing. So if you work through these goals, so say for example my goal was a bench press goal. I wanted to lift 100 kilograms on a bench press. That was my goal. First of all, we have to decide, is it specific? So for my goal, obviously it will be very specific because I've told you what it is that I want to do, and it's also gym related, so it's very specific. Is it measurable? Yeah, it's measurable. Very easily you can just decide how much weight is on the bar, how much weight that you're going to lift with the client, and you can also set a long-term goal to lift, a medium-term goal, and a short-term goal, so it's easily measurable. Achievable. Now that'll depend on the client's experience and history, etc. So you could ask your client, have you ever lifted a certain amount of weight in the past? They might say yes, they might say no. Maybe you can look at the client and think, okay, they look reasonably fit. Maybe they could lift that sort of weight. So you use your own experience. But more importantly, when you get them in the gym for the first few weeks, that will really help give you an understanding of whether or not they'll be able to achieve that goal. And then you can always change this, as you go on through the weeks. You can always alter this and sit down with your client and say, listen, we're way off our expectations. We need to just lower them, or you might be exceeding them, which will be a good thing as well for boosting confidence, the client's confidence. So achievable. The next thing is realistic. So it's kind of on par with achievable. Is it realistic? Well, if I said, I've never bench pressed before and I want to bench 200 kg in 8 months to 10 months, it's just not going to happen. So you need to sit down with your client and let them know, this is not very realistic. Maybe give up, you're going to need a lot longer than that. We're going to need to put on a lot more muscle mass, etc. So you need to make sure it's realistic. And then lastly, time bound. Well, you can see the dates here, so that's a rough sort of time bound, but we can make it even more specific than that by putting an actual date on these goals. So for example, with a long-term goal, if it was 10 months away or 12 months away, you could say, okay, we're going to complete this goal by the 2nd of the 2nd, 2026. So they know exactly then what the date is and where they've got to aim towards. If you put a date on these goals, it's much more likely that the client will achieve them. Whereas if you just left an open date and said roughly a year's time, the client's got lots of maneuverability there to make excuses and put it off for another day, or it just makes it easier to fail at the goal. So put an actual date on these goals. And it doesn't just have to be a weightlifting goal, it can be weight loss, it can be a nutritional goal, whatever you decide in there with your client. Once you get to this point, you're looking at a summary of lifestyle and activity advice given. So when you completed this questionnaire, and you might have come across something where the client said, I don't drink any water and I smoke. So your advice might have been at that time during the interview that, did you realize how much not drinking water affects your fitness? It's not great for your skin. It makes you feel more tired. So any lifestyle advice that you gave in here, and especially real specific advice, you want to try and add to this list, to this box here. Once you've completed all of the induction and the client interview, you just then need to go through and check these boxes to make sure that you've not missed any part of the client interview. We then come on to the program card. So this is now where we start to fill out the exercises that we're going to be using on our practical assessment with our clients. And the exercise session itself is going to be an hour long, and like we said before, it's going to include a warm-up, which you can see here. So this is what's known as a ramp warm-up, and you can find the information on what these are in your manuals, but it basically stands for raise the pulse, activate key muscles, mobilize joints, and final preparation or final pulse raiser. The work domain is basically how hard this particular exercise is going to be. So if it's light or moderate or intense, you would write that in there. The next thing we've got here is the RPE scale, or again how hard they're working. Now the RPE scale, you'll be shown this by your tutor on your practical sessions. The RPE scale stands for rate of perceived exertion, and it is a 1 to 10 scale, which basically means 1 is not working very hard at all and 10 is working at absolute maximum. And it correlates, it's easy for me to say, to heart rate. So if 1 on the RPE scale is 10% of your maximum heart rate, 10 on the RPE scale will be 100%. So for example, if we're just doing a fat burning session and we wanted to stay around about 60% of the heart rate max, we would tell the client that we need to be operating around about RPE 6. The coaching notes section here, which you'll see for all of these different boxes, is where you're going to write 2 or 3 bullet points and you're going to describe exactly how to do each exercise. So for example, if my first exercise was jogging on the treadmill for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, then I need to describe how to jog on a treadmill. So I could have in here heel to toe action, nice upright posture, breathing freely, nice relaxed arms, something like that. So if I did choose running for the first part of the raise the pulse, I could select a treadmill. So I could put in there treadmill, jogging, work domain. I'm just going to go light to moderate, target RPE, maybe starting around about RPE 1, going right the way up to RPE 5 or 6. The next box that we're going to look at filling in is activating key muscles. So when I'm thinking about warming up the body, I need to be thinking also about the rest of the workout, or the main workout that I'm going to be doing. Now for the purpose of this assessment, you actually have to choose a full body workout. So we're looking at legs, shoulders, chest, back, abs. So we need to be activating lots of different muscles. Whereas if it was just going to be a bench press session, just targeting the chest, maybe all we were doing here is some press ups or something, just to activate the muscles that we're going to be using for the bench press. But seeing as we are doing a full body workout, we need to be thinking about some exercises that target the whole body. So for example, here I would look at maybe choosing some dynamic stretching, which is basically stretching with movement. And I might start off just by doing some arm circles or some nice big chest stretches, which are nice and chilled, nice and light. So the work domain is going to be light, maybe edging towards moderate. Again, target RPE, because we just got off the treadmill, we're going to be around about RPE 5, 6. And again, just putting some coaching notes in here. So I might just put 2 exercises in here for the upper body, some shoulder circles, some pec stretching. Then I come down to mobilizing joints. Well, it's kind of the same as activating key muscles, especially if we're doing dynamic stretching, because we're moving joints and we're also activating muscles while we're doing these exercises. So it might be that I look at doing a squat, a nice deep squat to overhead reach for the third exercise, or should I say the first exercise in this box. Again, work domain, I don't want to go too high because it's only a warm up, so I'm going to stay around 60% heart rate max, so RPE 6 in here, and I might be going up to moderate now intensity wise because we're doing some squatting. And then again, some coaching notes in there. Keep your heels on the floor, bend at the knees and the hips, nice flat back. And another exercise I could maybe put in here might be a lunge, a bodyweight lunge with a twist maybe, to work out the legs and also work out the core and the side obliques. Work domain, again, probably going to be looking around moderate, and RPE is going to be around 6 again, maybe elevating up towards 7, and then again some coaching notes describing how to do those exercises. And then finally, a final preparation exercise or a final pulse raiser, something that's just going to be a little bit more difficult. Might just do a set of burpees, 10 reps of burpees or something like that, just to really get the heart rate a little bit higher so that we're ready for our main session. So the work domain is going to be moderate, maybe to intense now, and target RPE is going to be around about 6 to 7 or 8 if we're doing some burpees, and then again some coaching notes in there. So that will get the client nice and warm. It will have warmed up and activated all of the key muscles, mobilized all the joints that we're going to be using, and prepared our body for the main exercise session, which starts here on page 58. So the first thing we're going to look at is a cardiovascular interval session in here. This will be included on your practical assessment, and you need to look at choosing a piece of cardiovascular equipment. So it might be that you choose a rowing machine or a cross trainer or a treadmill or something along those lines, an exercise bike. Remember, in the description it said that you need to look at designing a 16-minute, there you go, it says it there, 16-minute CV component comprising of basic interval style training. So looking back in here, then we're going to be putting, say for example, a bike. Time is going to be 16 minutes. Target RPE. Now, because it's an interval session, your heart rate is obviously going to go up and down as the intervals become more intense or less intense. So the target RPE wants to be from round about RPE 5 right up to maybe RPE 8 or 9 even. You'd never really get to 10 because that will be absolutely towards the end of a bleep test, kind of full out sprint. And then some coaching notes on how to actually complete or use the bike. Now with the interval session, you can make it nice and easy for this. There's lots of different interval training types which you can speak with your support tutor about. But on every modern day piece of cardiovascular equipment, normally they have an interval an interval training kind of programmed button where you just press that and it will set the interval up for you. So that's kind of the easiest way to do it, and you would just make a note of what the intensity is going to be like throughout that program. So maybe how long it's going to last for and how many intervals you're going to have. Then we come down to our main resistance training section. So this is now all of the exercise machines. So like the resistance machines, as you can see here, RM stands for resistance machine, free weights and body weight exercises. You're going to choose the exercise in here. And remember, you've got to do a full body workout. All the sets, reps and recovery, what the intensity is going to be like again, light, moderate or heavy, and any coaching notes on how to complete each exercise. So just to give you some examples then, if I started with legs and I choose maybe a leg press resistance machine, so I'll put leg press in here, RM in here for resistance machine, 2 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute recovery. Obviously this will depend on your goal as to how many sets, reps and recovery you do. If you were training for strength and power, you would have more recovery time. If you were just training to kind of muscular fitness, then there'll be much less recovery time and more reps. Intensity, again, it depends on the goal, what you're actually looking to achieve. And another thing that we need to mention is when you put in this program together in exercise order, you don't want to be putting 2 exercises back to back that work the same muscle group. You want to try and avoid that. So if we chose legs for the first exercise, we don't want to choose legs again for the second exercise. And also when we do push-pull exercises, we want to try and separate body parts again. So for example, if I chose shoulders for the next exercise, I'm going to work my shoulders and probably my triceps as well. If I had chest after that, I'd still be working parts of the shoulder that I used here, and I would probably be using the triceps again. So you want to try and separate it by doing a push exercise followed by a pull exercise. So in here, if I've got shoulders, maybe a shoulder press with some dumbbells, so that would be free weights. 2 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute recovery, light to moderate, some coaching notes in there. The next exercise, I would look at choosing a pull exercise. So it's going to be working the back if we're pulling, and also the biceps. And I'll look at choosing maybe something like a seated row or a lat pull down, resistance machine, 2 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute recovery, light to moderate, and some coaching notes in there again. Then we look at the chest, and I might look at a bench press, free weights, 2 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute recovery, intensity moderate, and some coaching notes. The next exercise I might look at is the core or the abs. So I might look at maybe a plank. Obviously it's a bodyweight exercise. 2 sets. We're not going to do reps this time, it's going to be time held. So I might do 20 seconds hold, 1 minute recovery, depending on the client's fitness, whether that's going to be light or moderate or heavy. Some coaching notes in there. And then the last couple of boxes, we could just maybe look at some single muscle exercises, like maybe isolating the arms. So I might do a tricep push down with a resistance machine. Again, 2 sets, 10 reps, 1 minute recovery, moderate, coaching notes. And then maybe finish with a bicep curl, dumbbells, 2 sets, 10 reps, moderate, coaching notes again. Once you've completed that resistance training section and your cardiovascular interval section, that's the main part of the workout complete, and that is the exercises that you'll be taking your client through and working through the hour session with. And then once you finish, you then need to put together a cool down, which lasts for 5 minutes. And for the RPE, obviously you're going backwards this time in intensity, so you would start something like RPE 5, working down to RPE 1, so basically back to the heart at resting. Some coaching notes again, and in here you need to choose a different piece of CV equipment than the one you chose for your interval session and your warm-up. So it might be that you choose a rowing machine in here or a stepper, something like that. Then moving on to some stretches. So we need to do 3 upper body stretches and 3 lower body stretches. Again, you can choose which ones you want to choose in there, but normally you would try to choose stretches for the muscles that you use the most in the session. So it might be in here that you do a shoulder stretch, time to be held, maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and whether or not it's a static, maintenance or developmental stretch. And these will be explained to you on your practical sessions, but also they're in the manual. The next stretch you might do is a pec stretch or a chest stretch. Again, time to be held, 10 to 15 seconds. If it was developmental, it might be up to 30 seconds. Final upper body stretch, you might do triceps or the back of the upper arm. Again, 10 to 15 seconds, and some coaching notes on how to complete that stretch. And then you might do quads, hamstrings, glutes or calves. Again, it's totally your choice. Then we come on to the criteria that the assessor will use to mark your practical session. And you can see here that you have a tick, an X, a bullet point, or a Q for a question. And this is how the assessor will mark each one. So hopefully you'll just get lots of ticks in every one of these boxes. And as you can see here, the first thing you will do or be assessed on is how you start the session. So we call it an introduction. So in other words, you want to welcome the client. You want to talk about the health and safety of the gym. Things like fire exits, who's first aid trained, has your client got any injuries, etc. Then you're looking at verbally screening the client. And again, that's where you're asking about the client's health status. So have you got any injuries since we last met each other? Anything you need to tell me about today, injury wise, are you happy to train? And then off you go. Then you need to explain the health and safety, as we mentioned, and also outline the contents of the session. So what that means is you're just going to explain to them what you have in store. So if you're doing a full body workout that's going to include 7 exercises, you just talk them through that. You talk them through and see if they are happy with the program that you've put together, or if there's anything they want to change or they dislike. So once you start walking through the session, each box will be ticked off according to this marking criteria. The main session, or the main resistance section, as you can see here, you've got your warm-up to start off with, your interval session here, and then all of your exercises right the way through to number 7. That's your full body workout, and then your cool down. And then you can see lastly here, you're also assessed on how you end the session. So did you gather feedback from the client? Did you ask them what they thought of the session? Did you ask them about if they had any injuries? Did you get some feedback from them? And also, did you tidy away the equipment and clean up the environment once you've finished the session? Hopefully, you'll have navigated through that nice and chilled, nice and easy, with no stress, and you got yourself a nice pass after the session finishes. This page is also just an extension to this. So after each phase of the assessment, the assessor will have a little box to fill in some feedback for you, which he or she will give to you at the end of the session. And lastly, this is a self-evaluation for you to fill out. So after you've finished the practical session, you'll have 10 minutes or so to just sit down and, in your own words, just answer these questions. So, for example, explain the importance of reviewing your participants' progress at regular intervals. So, what's the benefits of doing that? How well did the exercises meet your participant needs? How effective and motivational was your relationship? Identify how you can improve your personal practice, and so on and so on. And then you'll be receiving some assessor feedback in there. And again, hopefully getting a pass. And that, guys, is the end of the learner record. So hopefully, if you have any questions, you can ask your support tutor. Good luck in filling this out, and you're well on your way to getting yourself qualified as a gym instructor level 2.